Have you ever wondered how a simple drink created by a pharmacist in the 19th century became one of the most recognized brands on the planet? Pepsi is more than just a soda. It's a story of bankruptcy, reinvention, fierce rivalry with Coca-Cola, bold marketing strategies, and even Soviet submarines. In this video, you'll discover the highs and lows of a brand that has survived wars, crises, and generations, and that still competes for shelf space and for hearts all around the world. Now tell me in the comments, are you #Team Pepsi or #Team Coke? Because after hearing this whole story, your answer might just change. Origin and foundation of Pepsi. It all began in 1893 in a small pharmacy in North Carolina, United States. There, a young pharmacist named Caleb Bradham was mixing ingredients behind the counter, trying to create a drink that was both tasty and helped with digestion. The result was a syrup made of carbonated water, sugar, vanilla, lemon oil, cola nut, and other spices. A homemade recipe that became a hit among pharmacy customers. He called the invention Brad's Drink. Simple, straightforward, and with his own signature. But a few years later, he realized he needed a more impactful name to grow. In 1898, the product was renamed Pepsi-Cola. The name comes from dyspepsia, meaning indigestion, one of the issues the drink promised to relieve. The idea was clear: to combine pleasure with digestive relief. Functional marketing, 19th century style. Now, tell me, did you think Pepsi was created as a healthy drink? Or did you believe it was born as a direct competitor to Coca-Cola? Leave your answer in the comments. I'd love to know. Expansion and early challenges of Pepsi. After changing the name to Pepsi-Cola, Caleb Bradham began to see his creation gain popularity. In the early 20th century, the drink spread quickly across the southern United States. By 1903, the brand was officially registered, and that same year, Bradham sold nearly 8,000 gallons of syrup. In just a few years, Pepsi went from a pharmacy experiment to a product with bottling licenses in several states. But the early success didn't last. In 1923, Caleb Bradham declared bankruptcy. The reason? Sugar prices skyrocketed after World War I. Bradham bet they would rise even more, bought huge stockpiles, and went under when prices collapsed. Pepsi went to auction. Over the next few years, the brand changed hands several times, trying to survive in a market increasingly dominated by Coca-Cola. Everything changed in the 1930s. Charles Guth, president of Loft Incorporated, a chain of candy stores that also sold soda, decided to buy the rights to Pepsi, and he had a brilliant idea. During the Great Depression, when money was tight, Guth started selling 12-ounce bottles of Pepsi for the same price as Coca-Cola's 6.5-ounce bottles, just 5 cents. The result? Sales exploded. For the first time, Pepsi began to seriously challenge its biggest competitor. So tell me, was that luck or market vision? Would Pepsi have survived without Charles Guth's bold move? Cola Wars. Starting in the 1930s, Pepsi didn't just want to survive. It wanted to compete head-to-head with Coca-Cola. The rivalry between the two brands began to take shape during this period, although Coca-Cola was still seen as the untouchable giant. That's when Pepsi made a bold move that would change its history, investing heavily in advertising. Instead of copying Coca-Cola, Pepsi created its own narrative, younger, bolder, and above all, more accessible. Its main tactic was selling twice the amount of soda for the same price, a strategy already working well. But now, it was time to tell the world. In 1939, Pepsi launched a commercial that made history. the first advertising jingle for a soft drink. It was simple, catchy, and memorable. The song went, "Pepsi Cola hits the spot. 12 full ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much for a nickel too. Pepsi Cola is the drink for you." The jingle stuck with a generation. It aired on radios across the U.S. and helped solidify Pepsi as the smart choice. During World War II, while the world faced rationing and uncertainty, Pepsi remained strong. While Coca-Cola made deals with the U.S. military to supply soldiers, Pepsi focused on the civilian market and kept investing in its image. It was in this moment of crisis, advertising and quiet competition, that the Cola Wars truly began. From then on, neither brand would ever again walk alone in the market. What one did, the other responded to, and thus began one of the greatest rivalries in advertising history. Marketing innovations by Pepsi. If Coca-Cola stood for tradition, nostalgia, and family, Pepsi chose another path: youth, modernity, and innovation. This shift started back in the 1940s, when Pepsi made a move that was bold for its time, launching ad campaigns aimed at the Black community in the United States. While many companies ignored or outright excluded this audience, Pepsi went the other way. They formed dedicated sales teams and invested in representation. It was risky. Some distributors boycotted the brand. But the impact was real, and the move helped differentiate Pepsi even more. In the 1960s, Pepsi reinforced this new identity with the famous slogan, "The Pepsi Generation." It wasn't just a soda anymore, it was a lifestyle. Pepsi wanted to speak directly to the youth of the time, those breaking away from the old ways, seeking freedom, independence, and identity. Advertising stopped being only about flavor. It became about attitude, about being ahead of your time. In the years that followed, Pepsi doubled down on this strategy, teaming up with huge names in music and pop culture. Michael Jackson, for example, signed with Pepsi in the 1980s and starred in commercials that blurred the lines between entertainment and product. Then came other icons: Madonna, Beyoncé, Britney Spears, Pink, Shakira, Mariah Carey. The list goes on. Pepsi was one of the first brands to understand that celebrities sell more than slogans. And if you think about it, that model is still used today in nearly every industry. Pepsi's global presence. With its roots firmly planted in the United States, Pepsi set its sights beyond. It wanted the world. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Pepsi began expanding into Latin America, Europe, and Asia. Growth was gradual but strategic. Pepsi adapted its campaigns and packaging to local cultures, all while maintaining its young and bold image. But it was in the 1970s that the brand starred in one of the most unexpected stories of the Cold War. Amid political tension between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, Pepsi achieved the unthinkable, closing a commercial deal with the Soviet government. Yes, while Coca-Cola was viewed as a capitalist symbol, Pepsi became the first American brand officially sold in the USSR. Since the Soviets couldn't pay in US dollars, part of the deal was made through barter. Pepsi received Stolichnaya vodka in exchange. Years later, when renewing the contract, Pepsi received decommissioned warships and submarines as payment. For a brief period, Pepsi had the sixth largest navy in the world, something that sounds like fiction, but really happened. That boldness paid off. The brand established itself as a global power and became synonymous with international presence. In Brazil, Pepsi arrived in the 1950s and has since alternated between moments of strong presence and quieter phases. Still, it remains one of the country's top soft drink brands. Rebranding and visual identity of Pepsi. One thing that has always stood out in Pepsi's history is how the brand constantly reinvented itself visually. Since the early 1900s, the Pepsi logo has gone through several changes, each reflecting the cultural moment of its time. The first logo, from the early 20th century, was elaborate, with cursive typography and the name Pepsi Cola featured prominently, in true turn-of-the-century style. In the 1940s, the logo gained a new element, a tri-color bottle cap with red, white, and blue, a nod to American patriotism during World War II. That visual became iconic and lasted for decades. Over time, Pepsi smoothed out its image, modernized its fonts, and simplified its forms, until reaching the minimalist style we know today. In 2008, for example, the brand launched a version with a new tilted globe and a more fluid design. That redesign sparked mixed opinions but reinforced Pepsi's willingness to change. And the changes didn't stop at the logo. Packaging evolved too. Cans went from retro labels to futuristic designs, always trying to reflect youth, movement, and modernity. The brand also launched variants like Pepsi Twist, Pepsi Max, Diet Pepsi, and others, each with its own visual identity. While Coca-Cola kept a more conservative and nearly untouched visual identity, Pepsi leaned into constant renewal. Some people see that as instability, others as boldness. But the fact is, Pepsi has always aimed to align with newer generations, including visually. And that strategy helped keep the brand alive in popular imagination, despite ups and downs in sales. If you compare old Pepsi cans with the current ones, you'll see more than just a design change. You'll see a story of adaptation and repositioning. Cultural and pop impact of Pepsi. Pepsi wasn't just known as a beverage. Over the decades, it became a cultural symbol, deeply connected to music, television, sports, and fashion. While other brands clung to tradition, Pepsi embraced pop culture. It was one of the first companies to realize that young consumers weren't just buying a product, they were buying attitude and identity. In the 1980s, this strategy reached its peak. The partnership with Michael Jackson turned Pepsi commercials into full-blown spectacles. Instead of just selling soda, the brand was selling experiences. Concerts, style, and it worked. After Michael, more stars followed. Britney Spears, Beyoncé, Pink, Shakira, Mariah Carey, Ray Charles, Lionel Richie, Madonna. All of them helped shape Pepsi's image as a bold, trend-setting brand. And it wasn't limited to music. Pepsi made appearances in movies, series, and major sporting events, including sponsorships in the NFL, NBA, and international football tournaments. Its commercials became cultural events, especially during the Super Bowl, where the brand delivered iconic ads. Pepsi became synonymous with youth, innovation, and cultural relevance. It understood, earlier than most, that a brand isn't just a product. It's behavior, language, and influence. And throughout the 20th century, Pepsi managed to translate that into campaigns that made history, company, and business. By this point, Pepsi was no longer just a soda brand. It had become a corporate powerhouse. In 1965, a major shift took place. Pepsi Cola Company merged with Frito-Lay, already a giant in the snack industry. That's how PepsiCo was born, a holding company overseeing a wide variety of food and beverage products. And that move changed the game entirely. Instead of depending solely on soft drinks, the company began operating across multiple segments of the food industry. Today, PepsiCo owns globally recognized brands like Gatorade, Quaker, Ruffles, Doritos, Cheetos, Lay's, H2OH, Lipton, Toddy Ho, and many others. In Brazil alone, it operates in over 20 different product categories. This diversification gave PepsiCo immense competitive power and a constant presence in the daily lives of millions of people, often without them realizing it. While Coca-Cola focused almost entirely on beverages, PepsiCo grew into a broad food and beverage conglomerate. In terms of revenue, PepsiCo competes directly with global players like Nestlé, Mondelez, and Unilever. In recent years, the company has also repositioned itself to meet new consumer demands, focusing more on low-sugar, low-sodium products and launching health-conscious lines. It's also heavily investing in sustainability, packaging technology, and logistics. What started as a pharmacy syrup in a small U.S. town became one of the world's biggest consumer goods companies, and even with all the market changes, new habits, and emerging brands, PepsiCo is still there, adapting, growing, and staying relevant. Curiosities and surprising facts. Over more than a century, Pepsi has collected not only products and campaigns, but also some fascinating stories that surprise even those who think they know the brand. One of the most incredible? A Cold War episode. As mentioned earlier, Pepsi was the first American soda brand officially sold in the Soviet Union. But here's the kicker. In the 1980s, the Soviets couldn't pay in US dollars. So what did they do? They paid with decommissioned warships. Yes, Pepsi temporarily owned the sixth largest navy in the world, with submarines, destroyers, and cargo ships under its name, all part of a barter deal with the Soviet government. Of course, Pepsi didn't go into military operations. The ships were sold for scrap metal, but the event went down in marketing and diplomacy history. Another fun fact. In the 1990s, Pepsi launched Crystal Pepsi, a clear soda version. The idea was to associate the product with purity and health, but the taste didn't catch on and it was discontinued. Still, it gained a cult following. Years later, limited editions were re-released for nostalgic fans. There was also Pepsi Blue, known for its sweet taste and striking color, which left a mark in many countries, including Brazil. Throughout its history, Pepsi has had both hits and misses, controversial ads, bold decisions, and strategic risks. But it's all part of a legacy built on movement and reinvention. From pharmacy syrup to global conglomerate. From digestive drink to pop icon, Pepsi has never been just about flavor. It's about time, culture, and boldness. Boldness to challenge the market leader, to change, to fail, to try again. Even if you prefer Coca-Cola, it's hard to deny. Pepsi's history is full of strategy, creativity, and relevance. A brand that may not have won the Cola War, but definitely made history. Now tell me, which of these facts or moments surprised you the most? Leave a comment. I read them all. And if you enjoy stories like this, packed with strategy, behind-the-scenes insights, and pop culture, be sure to follow the channel. There's much more coming your way.